Mask of a Diva, a Stan Kraychik mystery, Book 4, 1994. Author, Grant Michaels. Publisher, St. Martin's Press, New York. Author, Eric Aust. For all the divas, operatic and otherwise. Chapter 38. I drove Nicole back to Boston that night, where I stayed a while and visited with Sugar Baby. Then I returned to Abigail, but by the time I got back to Daphne's place, she had already retired, which didn't surprise me, given the evening's events. The next morning, I was having breakfast with her in the garden room, trying to ease her grief over the previous night's fiasco with a gentle reminder that a bad dress rehearsal usually meant a good opening night. And with that dress rehearsal behind us, opening night would surely make operatic history. Daphne said, "I hope you're right, my dear." "Have I ever been wrong?" "You most certainly have." Parker then entered to announce that Lieutenant Branco had arrived. To my surprise, Daphne invited him in, and then followed a lively session of Daphne and Branco apologizing for the mutual difficulties they'd caused each other. Daphne would protest, "You were doing your job." Branco would counter, "I was too impulsive." It was like a mother-son quarrel that finally ended in a friendly impasse. Once we'd all settled down with coffee, Branco told us that Rick Jansen had confessed to killing Adam Pierce and Marcella Ostanada for the love of Jonathan Byers. "For love?" I said. Branco nodded. "He even broke down when he confessed. I never saw a man cry like that." Apparently, Rick had really wanted to prove his love for John Byers, and since the only thing that mattered to Byers was opera, Rick had killed Marcella Ostanada to make sure the show was a success. That all made me wonder about my appallingly single-minded quest for a merit badge to prove my worthiness to Branco. "But how did he get into her room?" said Daphne. Branco replied, "He'd been flirting with Marcella all along. At some point, she told him her balcony door was always unlocked. It was an open invitation." "And Adam Pierce?" I said. Branco went on. "Adam Pierce's death was truly an accident. Rick had intended to hit Marcella with that scram." "He did it?" "Yep," said Branco. "How?" I said. "Rhonda Luca claimed that everything mechanical on stage was controlled by her computer." Branco said, "It was, and apparently Rick Jansen knows just enough about computers to be dangerous." "Ah, yes," said Daphne. "I recall Sir John introducing the young man as though he had rescued him from computer school." "But how did Rick know Rhonda's password?" I said. "He didn't," said Branco. "One thing Miss Luca never admitted was that she had left the council unattended for a few moments." "Why would she lie about that?" Branco said, "Because she was so preoccupied with one of the musicians that she accidentally left the computer in a ready state. And as the almighty stage manager, Miss Luca wasn't too eager to admit the lapse of attention to her job that also gave our killer his unexpected opportunity to kill Marcella. The only trouble was, in his urgency to use that chance, Rick Jansen missed his intended mark. So all Rhonda's stories about reloading the software." "Fiction," said Branco. "Accident or not, Rick had still managed to rid himself of a rival, and as for my theory about natural blondes being incapable of dastardly deeds, okay, so I was wrong. Rick Jansen wasn't just another boy toy exploiting the good looks and body. He was a serial killer." Daphne said, "At least we know Rick didn't kill poor Sonia Hatfield. He hadn't even arrived here yet." "I suppose that's some consolation," I said. "What about the other one?" said Daphne. "That awful wig man, Daniel Corfalio," I said. Branco said, "He knew that John Byers had taken the gauntlets from the costume room. Rick was afraid that that's you and me, Stan, would eventually link the gauntlets to him. That's why he came after you two with that knife. You were nagging him so much." Branco smiled as if to approve of my meddling nature. "And Mathilda," I said. "Innocent," replied Branco. "I never thought he could say the word." Daphne added, "Except for that double dose of sleeping potion," Branco said. "That's what made her panic and run, but now we can assume she really was telling the truth and following her lady's orders." I said, "I wonder if Madama Ostanada had a premonition that her final moment was approaching, and she wanted to make sure she wouldn't be awake for it." "What a morbid thought," said Daphne. "We'll never know," said Branco. What about the cigarette lighter? I said. Was Mathilda blackmailing Jonathan Byers with it? No, said Branco. It turns out the maestro had borrowed the lighter from Byers and forgot to give it back. Then he accidentally lost it through a hole in his pants pocket. That explains why Mathilda had that pair of pants tucked in with the rest of the clothes the other night. They were the maestro's. Right, said Branco. She had mended the pocket for him, but the maestro never told anyone about the missing lighter, not even Byers, because he was so embarrassed to lose it. Didn't Byers miss it? I said. It was solid gold. Branco replied. Rick gave it to him, without thinking that Byers never smoked. So in spite of its intrinsic value, the lighter was useless to Byers. Not even for sentiment, I guess? Hardly that, said Daphne. But then Mathilda found it, I said. Right, said Branco, in the opera house. So why didn't she just return it to Byers? She didn't know it was his, but she did know it was solid gold and extremely valuable. Then Branco smiled, and it was inscribed to the Queen of the Knights from her loyal pawn, R.J. Quite a line from a manly man, I said. And a bad joke at Mozart's expense, added Daphne. Branco finished. It took Mathilda a while to make the wrong connection to Rick as the owner. The flower beneath the foot, I said. Branco grunted, then went on. But when Mathilda showed Rick the lighter, he assumed that she assumed Byers had killed Marcella and had accidentally left the lighter behind, and now she was going to blackmail both of them. Too much logic, I said. Probably, said Branco. At least Byers got his lighter back. For whatever it's worth to him now, I said. But why was Mathilda always so scared and defensive if she was innocent? Daphne answered that simply. It was her whole life. The reality she created for herself, I said. Oh dear, said Daphne. I'd hoped you were beyond that kind of thinking. The woman did the best she could. We're all dealt different hands in the big game, young man, and some of them, no matter how much we may want to, just cannot be played with the panache of a boulevardier. That kind of talk was Branco's cue to exit. I'd better get back to Boston now, he said. Lieutenant, said Daphne, I hope you'll come back tomorrow for the opening night gala. I've set a pair of house seats for you. Branco accepted her offer graciously, then he said goodbye and left. I excused myself to Daphne and went after him. I found him outside looking at my rented Alpha. Nice car, he said. I settled my butt on the fender of his Alpha and said, nice vintage. He hesitated as if trying to snag some evasive words. Then he managed to say, thanks for your help. My pleasure, Lieutenant. Too bad I didn't learn how to power shift. There'll be another time. I hope so. Then Branco got into his car and drove off. After breakfast that morning, I presented Daphne with the silk shawl I'd bought for her. She was thrilled that she wrapped it about herself immediately, then swirled around the entrance foyer of the mansion like Loretta Young. And my dear, she said, I have a surprise for you too. She led me into the library, then scurried to her desk, fished out a large envelope, and handed me the title papers to the Alpha, along with a 5-year maintenance agreement. It's yours, she said, all paid for. When I could speak, all I could manage was, it's too much. It's nothing, she said. You've got a lot of energy back in my life. There's hardly a way to return a favor like that. I hope this little car will give you some fun. Thank you, I said. And I have a confession, too, she said. I was wrong to pay that building inspector to overlook the lack of safety screen around the stagehouse grid. You could have been seriously hurt. But you didn't intend. The road to hell, my dear. I was wrong. Your brush with death made me see that, and another thing I've decided I am going to formally adopt Maurizio. The poor boy was heartlessly abandoned by both his mother and his father. My second husband, no less. Finally, I realized that when he appeared on my doorstep, he had truly come home. So you see, my dear, the sports car is only a trinket. I owe you a lot more than that for refocusing my vision so clearly. If you ever do want to return to school, I intend to help you in every way possible. Thank you, I said again. I fought to hold back tears because I realized in a way that Daphne had just adopted me too. I spent the rest of the day doing mundane things, like laundry, and clearing my debris from the cottage. Balance, always balance. Later that day, I went to see Maurizio and tried carefully to explain that I would soon be leaving for Europe to be with my lover. Any hope of an affair between us and Abigail was nil. I felt like a cad, but Maurizio seemed to understand and accept it all, which made me feel even worse. There was no rehearsal scheduled that day. The principal singers were supposed to be recovering from the great energy they had expended in the full dress rehearsal, but since the dress rehearsal had foundered, there was little for the singers to recover from, except perhaps high anxiety. I spent that afternoon and most of the next day putting the finishing touches on the wigs. Like all great artists, I work best under pressure. Then finally came the evening of the biggest event of the entire festival, the official opening night performance. As I had predicted after the bad dress rehearsal, the opening night was started out as a grand success, what the French call unsuccessful. Lieutenant Branco and Nicole were present again, and Daphne was radiant in the silken shawl. And Rhonda Luca forgave me all my trespasses. She even gave me a butt slap for good luck before the opening curtain. But the tide turned abruptly during the intermission that, after Act 1, Parker arrived at the Opera House bearing a telegram for me. It was from Rafik's parents. 2 words only. Come quickly. I telephoned them immediately, but they weren't home. Only the household staff were there, and in the best French I could manage, I asked what had happened to Rafik. Their answer fell like a brick of cold lead. Il est très small. And like Jan Truelove in the Rake's Progress, I could not think. I could not explain. I could only say, I go to him. Branco sacrificed, seeing the rest of the opera, and offered to drive me to Logan Airport to catch a direct flight to Europe that night. It was during the ride that he suggested I might consider pursuing criminal investigation as a new career, maybe even go to police school. I can help you, he said. But I was too distressed and distracted by the news from Paris to talk about it then. I'd never even considered a career change until Branco had mentioned it. And I never got to see the full opera in performance, but later that summer, after I had returned from Europe, I got to read all the reviews of the New England Summer Opera Festival's production of Un Ballet in Mascara. Jonathan Byers had outdone himself and had created a contemporary stage masterpiece from a hackneyed chestnut of the operatic repertoire. April Kilkis had been hailed as the next great Verdi soprano. Brava, bravissima, etc. Maestro Toscanelli was spoken of in terms that implied divine resurrection. The entire festival was praised as the year's most significant operatic event in America, if not the entire globe, and last but not least, my fantastic wigs for the final scene. The masked ball itself were celebrated by every critic as perfect models of trenchant wit in the modern operatic theater. Brava, bravissimo, etc. But by that time, my life had changed so drastically that the kudos hardly mattered. Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.